Good morning, grade 7 students. In this video, we'll continue with our lesson respiration, and here we move to part 3. So let's start first with respiration in the aerial medium. What is responsible for the transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide in our body? In our body, the responsible for transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide is the blood. So the blood is the one responsible for the transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So they carry oxygen and they carry carbon dioxide. It's the blood. So the blood is responsible for the transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So blood carries carbon dioxide and it carries oxygen to different parts inside our body. And let's check what will happen. Blood reaching the lungs, whenever the blood will reach the lungs, will be poor in oxygen, meaning that it contains low amount of oxygen, while it's rich in carbon dioxide, meaning that contains high amount of carbon dioxide. But wait a minute, the air in the lungs is rich in oxygen. It's very rich in oxygen and poor in carbon dioxide. That's why we consume the oxygen. We take and we inhale the oxygen. So what I want you to know, what happened to the blood when it enters the lungs? This is our question for today. In order to answer this, you have to know first what the meaning of diffusion. So pay attention please to this word, diffusion. Diffusion is the movement of particle of a substance from a medium, from a place containing high concentration, or the meaning of high concentration, high amount, or high number, or even high pressure, or high volume, to a place or a medium containing low concentration, meaning that low amount or low volume in the substance. Let's have an example. If you have grade 7 and grade 7A and grade 7B. In these grades 7A and 7B, we have, in 7A, we have 100 students. And in 7B, we have 10 students only. So there is traffic in 7A. There is a high number. We have high concentration of students in 7A. So what will happen? Students from 7A, they will escape and they will move and they will go to 7B where there is low number of students. This is the concept of diffusion. So we can say grade 7A, they make diffusion. So instead of saying make diffusion, we have to use the verb diffuses. So grade 7A student, they diffuse from the place or the medium where there are high number of students, which is 7A, to a medium or a place where there is low number of the students, which is 7B. This action is called diffusion. Let's see this figure. In this figure, we have high volume or high amount of a substance. This medium contains high amount, and the other medium, this one, contains low amount, even though it's free. So what is going to happen is as follows. It's going to escape these elements or these components or these, for example, substances. They will diffuse, they will move from the medium containing high number to the medium containing low number. And this is called by diffusion. So diffusion, I will repeat it, is the movement of a particles of a substance from medium of high concentration or high number to a medium containing low concentration or low number of this substance. For example, imagine that we have high amount of O2. So we have O2 here. These red spots, they are the oxygen. So we have high amount of O2. So O2, they will escape to medium containing low amount of O2. So this low amount of O2 is called diffusion. So they diffuse. So you have to be familiar with this word, diffuse. So diffuse, we movement from particles from a medium of high concentration to a medium of low concentration or low amount in this substance. So here, the name of diffusion. So diffusion is the movement from a medium of high concentration to a medium of low concentration. Let's move to this application. In this application, we have a table showing the variation of the quantity of oxygen and carbon dioxide. What the meaning of variation? Meaning that the change in the amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide gases in milliliter. So what is the unit here used? It's milliliter, and the blood entering and the blood leaving the lungs. First of all, if I ask you compare the quantity of oxygen and the blood entering and the blood leaving. Comparison, it should be between oxygen in the blood entering and oxygen in the blood leaving, and not between oxygen and carbon dioxide. This is not a comparison. So you have to know that comparison, it should be done between oxygen in the blood entering and oxygen in the blood leaving. So let's have here, let's choose, let's say Adam. Adam Hajaji. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning.
Okay, first of all, whenever we say about comparison, what is comparison? You have to say to use these words: more than, or less than.
Listen.
Okay, great. Can you compare these values on quantity of oxygen and the blood entering and in the blood leaving? Can you compare it with to me? Yes, Adam. Okay, so let's have another one. Let's have Hassan Isroor. Thank you, Adam. Maybe has a connection problem, Adam. Hassan Isroor, you're raising your hand. Or Leia. Let's have Leia. Leia Day. Yes.
I didn't understand it a lot.
Okay, we are going to understand it. We are explaining it right now.
Okay.
Okay? Yeah. So Hassan Isroor, your question, your answer. Can you compare this?
Yes,
Yes,
the
do it.
blood
Yalla, Hassan.
entering the lungs is
Yes.
less than the blood
No,
leaving
no.
the lungs.
First of all, Hassan, pay attention. We are talking about the quantity of oxygen. So you have to compare
Oh,
the quantity of oxygen. So the quantity
the
of oxygen
of oxygen leaving the
and the
lungs,
blood entering the lungs was how much?
15
Milli,
milliliters,
which
which is
is
less than
excellent. The quantity,
the quantity of blood leaving
no, the quantity of
the
what? Of oxygen.
of oxygen
And the blood leaving the lungs.
the lungs.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Hassan. So let's repeat it. The quantity of oxygen in the blood entering the lungs was 15 milliliter, which is less than the quantity of oxygen in the blood leaving the lungs, which is 20. So this is the comparison. What if you want to compare the quantity of carbon dioxide and the blood entering and the blood leaving? Aya, can you do this? Aya Shimi, can you do this?
Yes.
Okay, yes,
The
Aya.
when the CO2 is entering,
You
it's
can say,
50.
pay attention, Aya. You can start the quantity of carbon dioxide and the blood entering. It's easier for you, okay?
The quantity of
Carbon,
carbon dioxide in the blood entering the
the lungs
lungs is
was
was 53 milliliters,
excellent, which is,
more than the blood leaving the
no,
lungs,
which is more than the quantity of carbon dioxide, okay?
more than the quantity of carbon dioxide
In the
in the
blood,
blood leaving the lungs,
excellent, which
49 milliliters.
very good, very good. Thank you, Aya. Very good. So here we compare. In this question, I want you to compare more than to interpret. So the blood entering the lungs was containing less oxygen than the blood leaving. In the blood entering, it was what? It was 15 milliliter. And in the blood leaving, it was 20. So the oxygen will move from the lungs to the blood. That's why entering the lungs it was 15, while leaving the lungs it becomes 20. So the blood carries the oxygen with it while leaving the lungs. So here we can deduce that the oxygen, what? It diffuses, meaning that it moves from the lungs to the blood. Lungs is rich in O2. That's why it moved from the lungs, which is rich in oxygen gas and O2, to the blood that is poor in O2. And here we use the word diffuses. Okay? So it moves from medium of high concentration, which is the lungs, in the كتير oxygen in lungs, to the blood اللي عنده poor in O2. Moving now to the second one for the carbon dioxide. So the blood entering the lungs contains more carbon dioxide than the blood leaving. So indicate the carbon dioxide diffuses from what? From the blood that has high amount of CO2, high amount of CO2 or rich in CO2 to the lungs that is poor in CO2. From here, we can deduce important notes, and these notes we have to study them in order to solve any exercise. These notes, they are, if I ask you about the gaseous exchange inside the lungs, what you have to say is, these two notes, you have to study them. They are very important. So oxygen gas diffuses from the lungs that are rich in oxygen to the blood that is poor in oxygen, whereas carbon dioxide gas diffuses from the blood that is rich to that's a blood that's rich in carbon dioxide to the lungs that is poor in carbon dioxide. So these two notes for oxygen and carbon dioxide at the level of the lungs, you have to study them. Because if you study them, you can solve any question related to this topic or to this idea about diffusion. So oxygen gas diffuses and escapes from the lungs that are rich in oxygen to a place with a low amount of oxygen, which is the blood. Whereas يلاقي carbon dioxide they diffuse from the blood اللي هو rich in carbon dioxide لمطرح فيها low amount of carbon dioxide which is the lungs. Okay, now let's move to talk about the insects and to talk about the trachea also. So blood entering is poor in oxygen, while the blood leaving in the lungs is going to be rich in oxygen gas. What is the respiratory organ of some animals living on land? We have lungs, which is for the mammals, and we as humans we are classified as mammals. So whenever we have the respiratory organ, which is the lungs, we have a special type of respiration. We will discover it. So lungs, it's the respiratory organ for special types of animals and humans as well, rabbits and the frogs on land. Those who watch the video will know what I'm talking about. Frogs, they are amphibians. Why? Because they live on land and in water. So, whenever we have the lungs as a respiratory organ, here we are talking about special type of respiration. This type of respiration is called the pulmonary respiration. So whenever we have the lungs as the respiratory organ, so we have a pulmonary respiration. So from now on, you have to keep it in your mind that whenever we have the lungs as respiratory organ, so here we are talking about pulmonary respiration. So you have to keep it in your mind. For example, humans or rabbits, they are classified as mammals, for example. So we have, for example, lungs. So we have pulmonary respiration. So this is the first type of respiration. So whenever we have the lungs as respiratory organ, so it's called pulmonary respiration. So let's move now to other types. What other animals respire on land, but they lack the lungs? What do the animals that live on land, not in water, on land, and they don't have lungs? What do we call this respiratory organ? By raising your hand, who can tell me what do we call this respiratory organ? They live on land, but they don't have lungs. What is this organ? Who can tell me? What is this organ? They can respire through special organs. Okay, let's have Aya. Yes, Aya.
The trachea.
Trachea, excellent. Thank you. So Lamar, trachea, it's, thank you, Aya. Lamar, Aya, she said
Yeah.
trachea, okay?
Yes.
Trachea is special for which type of animals? Can you tell me?
Insects.
Insects, very good. So the trachea is for the insects. So here we have the insects. So what is the name of their main respiratory organ? It is the trachea. Ahsan, what fun. So from now on, whenever we have the trachea as respiratory organ, here we are talking about special type of respiration. It's called tracheal respiration. So whenever we have the trachea as respiratory organ, so we have a special type of respiration. It's called tracheal respiration. Who can give me the two different types of respiration that we studied about them till now? Okay, Sari. Yes, can you tell me the two different types of respiration?
Different types of respiration.
Till now, we talk about two different types. The first one is
What's called the trachea.
tracheal respiration, whenever we have the trachea. Why the second one, what do we call it?
Uh,
Pul. Whenever we have the lungs as respiratory organs, so what do we call it?
oh, the lungs.
Pulmonary respiration, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, pulmonary, thank you. So whenever we have the lungs as respiratory organ, so we call it pulmonary respiration. And whenever we have the trachea as respiratory organ, so we call it the tracheal respiration. So till now we have two different types of respiration. Tracheal, when the respiratory organ is the trachea and is exclusive for the insects, and pulmonary respiration whenever we have the lungs as respiratory organ. So gas exchange in the trachea, similar to that in the lungs. But here we don't have lungs, we have trachea. These notes also, you have to study them. Whenever I ask you, describe the gas with exchange at the level of the trachea. So oxygen gas diffuses from where? From the trachea. This trachea is rich in oxygen gas directly toward the organs. Here the organs, they are poor in oxygen gas. Wherever carbon dioxide gas diffuses from where to where? From the organs that are rich in carbon dioxide to the trachea that are poor in carbon dioxide. So they move in opposite direction. Oxygen gas diffuses from a medium where we have high amount of oxygen, which is the trachea, toward the organs that contain low amount of oxygen. However, carbon dioxide diffuses from the organs containing high amount of carbon dioxide to the trachea containing low amount of carbon dioxide. So these notes, you have to study them regarding the gas exchange and the level of the trachea. Till now, we have two important notes you have to study them. Gas exchange at the level of the lungs and gas exchange at the level of the trachea. Now let's move to the earthworms. Earthworms, they have a special respiratory organ. It's the skin. So earthworms, they have cutaneous respiration because the respiratory organ is the skin. So here the third type of respiration. Whenever we have the skin as respiratory organ, so we call it a cutaneous respiration. Whenever we have the lungs as respiratory organ, it's called pulmonary respiration. Whenever we have the trachea as respiratory organ, so we are talking about tracheal respiration. So I want the move to Mia Hassan. Mia, can you give me conclusion about the three different types of respiration till now?
Yes.
Yes, the first one,
The lungs.
the lungs is the respiratory organ. What type of respiration it's called? What?
The type of respiration.
Yes, it's called pulmonary respiration, right?
Yes.
So lungs, pulmonary respiration. Trachea, what do we call the type of respiration?
The trachea.
Trachea, it's called what?
Oh, how to say it?
It's called tracheal respiration. Okay? So the third type, whenever we have the skin, so it's called
Skin,
cutaneous,
it's cutaneous respiration.
cutaneous respiration. So here we have three different types of respiration. I repeat now. Thank you, Mia. The first type is called the cutaneous respiration in the skin, since in this slide. The second one, tracheal respiration, when the trachea is the respiratory organ. And the third one is called the pulmonary respiration, whenever we have the lungs as respiratory organ. What is the respiratory organ? A fish living in water. What do you think, Michael? What do we call the respiratory organ? A fish living in water.
Gills.
Gills, they have gills. So excellent. So they have gills as the respiratory organ. So each gill consists of two layers, and we have here the gill filaments that are rich in blood vessels. Why do you think that we have high number of blood vessels in the gills? Who can give me the answer and take the first bonus point for semester 2? Why do we have many blood vessels in the gills? Raising your hand. Yes, Hassan Usrur, the first one to raise the hand. Yes, Hassan?
So
Why
it
do we have,
can take the oxygen from the water.
okay, many blood vessels, they are responsible. We said who transport oxygen and carbon dioxide?
Blood.
Blood. So why do we need blood vessels? To transport what?
Blood.
To transport what?
Oxygen.
And?
Carbon dioxide.
Excellent, Hassan. Excellent. Very good. This is the first bonus point. It goes for Hassan. Thank you, Hassan. So we have many blood vessels in order to ensure the transportation of the respiratory gases. What are these respiratory gases? They are oxygen and carbon dioxide. So what happens to the water when it reaches the gills? Let's move here. As you know, the water enters through the mouth. Okay? Water enters through the mouth of the fish. Water entering is going to be rich in oxygen and poor in carbon dioxide. So whenever it reaches the gills. It starts to move from the mouth and move toward the gills in the fish. When it reaches the gills, what will happen? Blood vessels in the gills, they are poor in oxygen. They have low amount of oxygen and they rich in carbon dioxide. So what will happen? Oxygen diffuse, will diffuse from the water where we have high amount of oxygen to the blood in the gills where we have low amount of oxygen. So oxygen diffuses from the water where we have high amount of oxygen to the blood that contains low amount of oxygen. Carbon dioxide, the opposite. Carbon dioxide will diffuse from where? From the blood that contains high amount of carbon dioxide to the water that contains low amount of carbon dioxide. And then the water will leave through what? Through the upper column. So here, if I want to say that water leaving is going to be poor in oxygen. Why? Because the fish will use the oxygen and it will release carbon dioxide. So the water will be rich in carbon dioxide. While to write a short text to explain the gas exchange, you can write it like this. Water enters the mouth. Water entering is rich in oxygen and it's poor in carbon dioxide. They are the same idea, but here I organize it more and more in order to copy it on your copybook. Water enters the mouth. Water entering is going to be rich in oxygen and poor in carbon dioxide. Then the water reaches the gills, where the blood vessels, the blood in the gills, they are poor in oxygen and they are rich in carbon dioxide. So what will happen? The oxygen will diffuse. And diffusion is the movement from high concentration to low concentration. Oxygen will diffuse from water that is rich in oxygen to the blood that is poor in oxygen. Carbon dioxide, the opposite. Carbon dioxide will diffuse from the blood that is rich in carbon dioxide to the water that is poor in carbon dioxide. And the fourth step is the water leaves the operculum. This water leaving will be poor in the oxygen, contains low amount of oxygen. Why? Because the fish uses the oxygen already and reaches in carbon dioxide. And this water leaving will be poor in oxygen and rich in carbon dioxide. So under the water, we said that on land, that's why I told you those who watch the video will know what I'm talking about, the frogs. The frogs, we call them amphibians. Can you explain what the meaning of amphibian? We took this in grade 4 and grade 5. What the meaning of an amphibian? Who can tell me before we start? Before we continue our idea, what is amphibian? I want other than Hassan Sroor. Hassan Sroor is the star of the day here. Hassan Sroor, I want other than Hassan Sroor. I want Adam Haik or Karam. Karam, let's move to Karam. Karam, Karam is not joining through the audio. Yes,
Yes,
Hassan.
that's
Okay, yes, Karam. So what do you think? What the meaning of an amphibian? Do you know?
an amphibian.
Yes, what the meaning of an amphibian? You took this in grades 4 and 5.
يعني frogs أو
Yes,
هيك
but
شيء.
what the definition of amphibian? Do you know definition?
No.
Okay, let's move. Thank you, Karam. Let's move to Selena. Selena, what do you think about an amphibian? Selena Baweb. Can you hear me? Okay, let's see who's raising your hand. Adnan Arauni. Adnan, what do you know about amphibian? Do you know what the meaning of an amphibian?
It's a part of the vertebrate,
Yes.
vertebrate group,
Yes, what is
and
special about amphibians? Do you know?
it can breathe. It can breathe underwater with its skin.
It's an,
And
as, it's an
on
animal
land,
that lives both on water and on land. That's why we call
yes,
it amphibian. Very good, Adnan. So the amphibian is the animal that lives both on land and on water. So and water, sorry. So under the water, the frogs, Ali Nasruddin, they respire through their skin. While when we talk about the frogs, they on land, they respire through what? What do you know, Ali? We said that frogs they respire on land through their what? Yes, Ali? Ali Nasruddin, do you hear me? Yes, we said that the frogs they respire through a special organs on the land. What do we call this organ? It's called what? Yes, on the land they respire through a special organ. What do we call this organ? Who can know this? Who can tell me? Who can tell me what do we call the organ other than Aya and Hassan Sroor? I want a new voices. Mia, yes, Mia. What do we call the organ that the frog used to breathe
By the lungs?
through the lungs? What do we call the type of respiration? Can you give me the type of respiration?
The type of
Yes. What do we call the type of respiration through the lungs? What do we call the type of respiration? It's called pulmonary respiration. Okay? Thank you, Mia. So here we have the frogs underwater, they respire through their skin. So their skin becomes the respiratory organ. So here, if I want to move to the frog, they have cutaneous respiration under the water. They are similar to the earthworm. Under the water, they have similar type of respiration like the earthworms. Earthworm, we said we have cutaneous respiration. Frogs underwater, they respire through their skin. So here the frog, it's an amphibian that lives both on land and under the water. In water, it has cutaneous respiration. Why? Because they breathe using what? They breathe using their skin. While on land, they have pulmonary respiration. What the meaning of pulmonary? They breathe using their lungs. So till now, we have different type of respiration. Whenever we have the lungs, it's called pulmonary. Wherever we have the skin, it's called the cutaneous. And whenever we have the trachea, we have a tracheal respiration. And the frog is special. It has two different types of respiration. On land, it has pulmonary respiration, and under the water, it has cutaneous respiration. And this is everything for our session for today. But before we end this session, I have a question. This question is for 2 bonus points. It's for +2. So the one who knows this will have the +2 for this week. The question is, if we have an earthworm, I'm not around raising your hand before I ask the question. So if we have an earthworm, and this earthworm is covered by the let's say clay. I covered the skin of the earthworm by clay. What will happen for this frog? What will happen for this frog? Yes, Leah, your answer is. Leah Daych, your answer is. Yes, Leah, you can give your
Yes,
answer.
I couldn't. Yes, I couldn't unmute, so that's why.
Okay,
The frog, the earthworm would die because the skin is the respiratory or the organ of the earthworm.
excellent, very good, very good. This is the first 2 bonus points for Leah Day for this semester. Very good. So the Leah said that. Thank you others for raising your hands, but Leah was the first one. So the answer is the earthworm will die. So this is because why? Because the earthworm had the skin as the respiratory organ. So if we cover the skin, it can't breathe, so it will die. Excellent. Thank you all for joining the session. Thank you for watching this video.